This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my voice in support of this act to amend the Transport Authority Cap 2958 to provide for the expansion of the functions of the Transport Authority. Now, as was highlighted earlier, this act would amend Section 4 of the Principal Act and basically give the Transport Authority the ability to issue, suspend, or cancel the licenses of drivers and conductors in respect of public service vehicles, motor omnibuses, minibuses, and road taxis. We'll also give them the authority to issue and suspend or revoke permits. And as we would have learned earlier today, that was a function that was carried out by the Barbados Licensing Authority. And the Transport Authority only had the authority to issue a permit letter, which is basically a pre-approval, and then that person would then have to make their way to the Barbados Licensing Authority to have the permit granted. The amendment also amends Section 23 as well, and this will give them the authority to issue the permits that would normally be issued by BLA, amongst other things. But you get a sense that we are expanding and grounding in the Transport Authority, which is the entity that rightfully was conceptualized to carry out these functions. But for whatever reason, those functions remained in the bosom of the Barbados Licensing Authority, and as a result, left the Transport Authority with both as the member for St. Michael's South East said, without the thief to regulate and properly control that transport sector. But I want to focus my short intervention today on basically where the member for St. Thomas, where she left off. And she would have focused heavily on the impact that indisciplined, unruly, unorganized sector can have on the minds of our children. And let me just preface that by explaining to you the importance of the transportation sector to Barbados. In any modern society, really, transportation is vital to the social and the economic well-being of that country. And it goes much further than just taking persons from point A to point B. It's a very important economic impact that we do not really give the credit to that's due. I mean, the transport sector employs thousands of people in Barbados. It's perhaps one of the biggest employers in Barbados. Thousands of persons find work in different areas, whether it be drivers, conductors, people who are cleaning, people who service, all such like that sector is huge and employs thousands. But in order to ensure that sector does what is expected to do, what it plays its role in society and its contribution to the economy, there must be discipline. And we must do, as a government, we must do all that we can to root out any kind of indiscipline, any kind of unethical practices that may creep in from time to time. And over time, we have seen that. Now, this new Transport Authority Amendment Bill, it proposes to do that, and it has garnered a lot of support from a number of stakeholders, including the various PSV associations who this particular amendment will impact, because they know full well that what we are doing with these regulations are things that in some cases were on the books for years, but were just not being enforced or were not enforceable. And interestingly enough, many of those individuals who are within the sector are the ones who have been quite vocal over the years in condemning some of the rampant indiscipline and reckless display by some, a very small few, a very small few of the motorists. And indeed, these would have been fingers would have been pointed, and in some cases, rightfully so, to those persons who ply their trade in the Zadars and in the minibuses, because historically those were the ones who, over time, would have been engaging in some of these reckless behaviors where they drive with very little regard for the safety of others and for the lives of those persons who entrust to them, persons who are traveling on the van. And I just want to emphasize that this represents a very small minority. The vast majority of persons out there driving minibuses and vans and other public service vehicles are right-thinking, hard-working, honest persons who are out there making a living for themselves, for their families, taking care of their children, just like any of us. So I just want to make that point. But like in everything else, there are always a few bad apples. In schools, you have a whole school, 900 children. You may have 10, 20, 30 causing wreck around the school and gives the school, the entire school, a bad name. Sometimes they give the education system a bad name. So just like doctors, one bad doctor can make it bad for all the others, or one bad engineer can make it bad for all the other engineers. They're bad actors in every sector. And this is something that was realized a long time ago. And perhaps what would have given rise to the conceptualization of the Transport Authority. Now, why, after being proclaimed 15 years ago, we have not put in place the regulations that would, would give it the authority to act, is anyone's guess. But the reality is that we now, over time, have seen the wisdom in having these regulations put in place. We have engaged those persons who are directly impacted by this sector. We have engaged those persons who are directly involved in this sector. And it's a combination of all those persons, all those stakeholders, the public, the public at large, the traveling public, the owners, the conductors, the drivers, all those stakeholders. We have engaged their consultation, and it's those persons who inform the regulations that will follow the passage of this particular amendment. But as I said, I want to shift my focus on the impact that this sector has had over time on some of our children, not all, some of our children. Mr. Speaker, thousands of our children depend on public transport every single day to get to and from school, every day. And what we have found is that what they have in that short period of time, maybe an hour or two that they spend on the bus in the morning and in the afternoon, can have a very negative impact on their well-being if not regulated. It can affect them emotionally, psychologically. It can affect their education. It will affect their health. Their whole social development can be negatively impacted if we expose them to a system that lacks discipline and lacks regulation. And why I say that? A culture. I like that the member for St. Thomas used the term culture, because that's exactly what it is. It is a culture. And it comes with its own value system. In some cases, one would argue it comes with its own language, terminologies that are used only within the van stand and the vans, within the van culture. So it is a subculture has developed. And for some reason, has found an audience with many of our young, impressionable children. And as such, we have situations in schools where a child's education is impacted by the route that they take. And let me tell you how. It may sound funny, but there are children who will wait at the bus stop for hours every single morning for a special bus. I don't know why. But they will wait for hours for that bus. I will get into school 2 and 3 hours late, missing out on crucial instruction. And even when they get into school, interested in learning, can't learn. Because of the experience in the van, the exposure to the loud music, the conversations, the vulgarness. They can't learn, can't concentrate. In fact, they're probably excited the entire day about the expectation that they're at 2:30 or 3:30 or 4:30, whatever time maybe in the evening, that they back out again and back in the same van. And let me tell you something. I've seen this live with my own 2 eyes where children will walk 2, sometimes nearly 3 miles along a route, especially along that highway 1, that route, for miles, just so they can get on the van and drive back up the road. I mean, so they could walk home. The distance they walk to catch the van, they could walk home, because they're just going to get a seat. So they don't want a seat. They want to sit down next to the driver on the engine. I don't know if they still do that, because this was in my times, and this was in the time of the what do you call it, the train. And have you ever hear people talk with train? We talk in the 90s. I can only imagine that the situation has gotten a little better. You understand? Yeah. Those vans, B25 and all those were the big names in my day. And we would, not me, but people would walk for hours. I mean, not for miles, just to get a seat on one of those vans. And why? Why are children so attracted to these vans? As I said, the part of the subculture. In those vans, you can get to hear the songs, the songs that you hear on the radio, that you hear only the clean versions. You get to hear the raw version in the radio. I mean, in the vans. There's some parents who would not allow their school-age children to go into the clubs, go fetting, going to the dance hall. But when they get onto these vans, they have all the experiences that you would find in a dance hall. You get all the experience that you would find in a van. It's tantamount to being in the club. So children are attracted to that and look forward to that on a daily basis. And that is exactly what attracts many of them to the vans. And then, as a result, the conductors, sometimes more so than the drivers, become some kind of folk heroes or superstars. People that children will look up to, impressionable children will look up to. And some of them use that to their advantage and to the disadvantage of the small child. These are things that have happened in Barbados, and I believe continue to happen in Barbados even as we speak, where we have young children who might be looking for love in all the wrong places, who believe that what their parents are doing every day, working hard every day to put food on their table and put a shelter over their head and clothes on their body, is not love. So they go looking for love somewhere else. And they find it sometimes in these vans because they're idolized by other children. They're idolized by their peers, so they think that these people are bigger than life. And in many cases, they end up being used and abused. These are unfortunate things that have resulted from an indisciplined transport sector in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I mean, you can go on and on because the stories are they're countless. And we all know, because many of us were in school during that van era. So we all have our own experiences with these things. And it saddens us that when, as now, many of us are fathers to teenage children, that we know that these things are still happening. And I only hope that this amendment would be a start. Because it could only be a start. I know it has started, but a start to just to reel in some of this bad behavior. Just to rein it in, some of this bad behavior, and perhaps over time put a stop to what we've been experiencing for too long. And let me just touch on some of the ways this particular bill intends to treat to this bad behavior. Section 9, let me just make sure I have these sections correct. It looks at the driver's conduct. The driver's conduct. It is amazing how drivers can engage in activities that are unsafe. I remember being on a van the last day of school, and we were in a van, and the man was milkshaking, rocking the cradle. I don't remember what it was, 25 years, 26 years ago. But I remember that there was somebody in the back of the van saying, "Kill all of me, kill all of me, kill all of me." I actually remember who it was that said it too. One of my classmates. And the bus driver, probably not even much more mature than the children himself, decided that he can rock the van as much as he can rock it. So we have to look carefully at the conduct of some of these drivers, because they basically have the lives of our children in their hands. They hold the lives of our children in their hands every day. So we have to be very, 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 very careful as much as possible with who we entrust the responsibility of transporting our children to. So there are a number of regulations as it relates to the drivers' conduct. I'm not going to go into them now, but just know that they look at almost all of those malpractices, or those bad, reckless driving behaviors that they engage in, and we treat to them individually and specifically so as to clamp down and be very specific as to what it is that drivers are not allowed to do, as well as the conductors, because they too also engage in some reckless behaviors. Sometimes they stall traffic. They cause a lot of congestion sometimes in areas because I know that they're hustling for the dollar. I understand that. We all understand that. I just want to make the point that there are other places in the world where people hustle for a dollar every day and do not engage in some of the bad behaviors that we see on our streets. So it is not impossible for a person to make a decent living every day without engaging in reckless behavior that endangers people's lives. Now, I'm just speaking to those persons. If you know as an operator that you have not engaged in any reckless behavior or any of the things that I would have mentioned before, then I'm not speaking to you. I am speaking to the ones who engage in these things every day without realizing that they are being a menace to our society, that they are putting our people's lives, the nation's children's lives, the lives of travelers, of the traveling public in danger. So those drivers, those conductors, we all have specific regulations that speak to your behavior, as well as the drivers, the owners. Yes, they're responsible for the actual physical, the van, but at the same time, the installation of the radio or such like. I remember for years they were telling these van owners to remove the radio from the van. I mean, I can understand in the 90s when we all listened to music in a communal space. People listen to loud music and people shared music. But these days, the modern traveler, the modern commuter is not interested in hearing anybody else's music. People, where you go in the world and you hear loud music on public transport, people have with the AirPods, people have their headphones. People enjoy listening to music privately. Now, that is a thing. You know, nobody don't want to hear what you are listening to. Persons will be happy to sit quietly in the bus with their headphones, just playing in their ears, and they're in their own space, their own world, and enjoying their ride. That is the modern commuter. And some of these owners need to come, get with the program. Come into the 21st century and realize that, we're moving away from that loud noise and that thing that annoys, is inconvenient for persons and annoys persons. For the elderly to get on the bus, they can't hear their own voice because of the noise, the lewd lyrics and things, the lyrics that promote gun violence, all this foolishness, the DJs cussing over the music, all these things you get exposed to. You don't want to be exposed to that when you're traveling. Not in these times. And I don't know why they're not moving with the times. Get in the van is quiet, and believe me, you turn off the music in your van, people are going to find a way to entertain themselves while they're on your van. Everybody has a cell phone. Most people have headphones. And if people want to listen to music, they will listen to their own music. You don't need you or need anybody playing music in the ears to enjoy themselves. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. And that's the modern commuter. And it's just a free advice. I mean, it's going to take some time, but I guess eventually they'll come around and realize that, people just doing their own thing these days. Now, we would have alluded to training. There has to be training. The skills of yesteryear, the skills of the 90s and a decade ago aren't, they're not going to cut it in the 21st century bar, but they're just not going to cut it. We have to be constantly training and retraining persons. Now, you would have heard the member for St. Microsoft, he's mentioned that there'll be service-based training. There'll be driving etiquette, which is important because this industry attracts a lot of young people, many of whom came out of school without any real formal training, any skills. And I'm speaking mostly of the conductors, because the drivers would obviously have to have skills, and there will be some separation between the time that they finish school and the time that they can actually drive a PSV because of the age limitation. But for the conductors, they could come out and be 18, 19 years old and be a conductor. And those are the ones who engage more so directly with the public than the drivers. The drivers are there sitting. I mean, they sometimes they talk to you when they're not supposed to, but they are, for the most part, paying attention to the road and driving, whereas the conductor is up and down to the bus. They're getting out, they're engaging public on the road, at the bus stops, and in the bus. So you need to have a certain amount of customer service skills, certain etiquette, how you deal with people. You go in other jurisdictions, people come to you very politely and very decently, and they serve you and they talk to you. We need to have that kind of standard when it comes to our conduct. You can't just drag a fella off the block and just put him in a van and expect that he would have all those skills. They don't come to you naturally, not for everyone. So that's why it's important to train them. Every 2 years or so, you refresh them. And if there's any new best practices around the world, you're going to introduce them. I don't expect that those things will all be government-driven. Of course, these associations now, these main associations, they have seen the importance of not only celebrating their employees or their members, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast mentioned that she just recently attended a function for one of the members who would have been in that business for 41 plus years. But I'm sure they're also going to be responsible for, they're also going to see the importance and engage in the training of their members and the skilling of their members. So these are things that we expect to see going forward. They certainly can't depend solely on government. They have within them, not only is it going to benefit the traveling public, it's going to benefit them as well, because they want to improve on their product. So I envision that they would also be putting their own membership through some of these programs to ensure that they have the best possible skills. The bill also anticipates that we will introduce some modern technology in the form of GPS technology, which works both ways. You know that vans are off route, but also you will know that technology will tie into other technologies that will allow persons to be able to more accurately determine when a bus would get to their bus stop, or when a bus would get them home, or when a bus would get them to work. Like overseas, when you travel on a bus, you know you can go at the bus stop within 2 minutes or so, and the bus will be there, and you know exactly how long it's going to take to get to your location, and that is all grounded in technology, in global positioning satellites. I think that's what it's called, GPS. That is all grounded in that technology. So as going forward, that kind of technology is going to be used not only to regulate, but also to assist the public in terms of making their plans and their preparations when they leave their homes. So this amendment is going to kickstart some interesting and some exciting changes in the sector. Also, we've mentioned the drones that we'll have a national drone program, I suspect, and that would also play into the assistance of knowing exactly where buses are, because if you're off-road, then you may also need some video footage to prove not only that the GPS proves that you are in this location, but also you have a drone out there that has footage that can take physical pictures of a bus or a van someplace where it ought not to be. So those things work hand in hand for the most part. And I'm sure the other things, cashless is going to come on stream. All these things are going to make life for the commuter and for those persons, PSV operators, a little easier as we go forward. All of the elements moving slowly together to form a modern transit system here in Barbados. Now, Mr. Speaker, we expect that there will be some resistance to what we are proposing here. Resistance to change. And resistance to change is a natural thing. It's a natural thing. Most persons, when they sense change, they are sometimes overcome with an emotion of fear. And that fear is what more or less drives their resistance, because they're being taken out from their comfort zone. They don't know exactly what to expect. And it's human to be fearful. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we are going to embark on an intensive, almost aggressive public relations program to sensitize all stakeholders, public at large, the traveling public, the drivers, the conductors, the owners, everybody involved as to what these changes, what these regulations, what these amendments will entail. Because we understand the human nature. We understand how people behave when it comes to change. Even if that change is for their own good, people will resist it. I remember, well, I can't say I remember in Barbados, but I read about the introduction of the seatbelt laws in other jurisdictions in the States, where back in the 80s, when those laws were introduced, persons were strongly opposed to the use of a seatbelt. They complained that the seatbelt was too restrictive. They complained that it was uncomfortable. The gentleman that introduced the bill, they compare him to Hitler. It was the worst thing that happened to America since Hitler, because he introduced a bill that made persons more aware of their safety and made persons a bit more safe, made it more safe for persons driving their cars. And people resisted that. And when it was introduced in the Caribbean in the 90s, we resisted it too. You know, and nowadays, if you sit down in your car and you don't put on your seatbelt, you feel as though you'll fall out your car. It's almost natural now to buckle up when you get into your car. It feels odd and strange to sit in a car and drive it without having your seatbelt on you. But those same seatbelts people were up in arms against when they were first introduced. It says natural. Happens all over the world. And those seatbelts, I don't have the statistics, but I know that seatbelts would have saved millions of lives in the period between 1980s and now. And I think seatbelts were made mandatory in the 60s, but people resisted them until they became law in the 80s. And even then, in the 80s, only 18% of persons drove with seatbelts. I'm sure that those persons were probably laughed at by their peers. Nowadays, everybody drives with a seatbelt. So resistance to change is natural, but over time, as long as you enforce the laws, and you keep, and you hold the hand of the public, and you inform them, you sensitize them, they will become compliant. And then it becomes second nature to do, to put on your seatbelt or do whatever the law is asking you to do. And the same thing, you had some, not as much resistance as for the seatbelt, but you had some resistance to the cell phones. Persons not being able to talk with their cell phone, which is unsafe. And persons not being able to be chatting and messaging on their cell phone while driving. From time to time, people may still do it, I'm sure. But there are a lot of persons now who would never do it now because it has been outlawed. In fact, there are people who, if they call you and they discover that you're driving while they're talking to you, they would end the call. They're not even going to wait for you to end the call. They're going to end the call. Sometimes you have the Bluetooth, they still end the call. No, you should not be driving and talking. You shouldn't be driving and texting. You shouldn't be doing any of these things because people understand that it was danger. And these are things that people were resistant to in the past. So, and the good thing is that the technology now is moving in the direction because technology understands that people still, even though they have the restrictions, they still have the need to talk when they're driving. They still have the need to do these things, so they introduce the Bluetooth. And now I'm sure every new car that comes on the market now has Bluetooth and whatever other new technology now is out there to enhance the driving experience for persons when they're driving and still have that element of safety. And persons will be that distracted when they drive. All right, so which brings me down to my final point I'm going to make, and that's enforcement. You can have all these wonderful laws on the books, but if there's no enforcement, then you might as well not have them. And that's why this bill intends to see the recruitment and the introduction of more traffic officers. We have some traffic officers. I think you've seen them in the licensing authority over the years. From time to time, they would have come and even stop the buses from time to time. I've seen that. But these ones would have a more, they obviously their job description will be tailored more to the PSVs as opposed to the other ones who are currently at licensing authority that would have responsibility for all vehicles and other aspects of the Barbados Licensing Authority. Their own inspections and other things that they need to do up there. So we will have traffic inspectors who you will see from time to time helping to enforce these regulations, along with the police, of course, who will continue to play their part, but we'll have this additional body of persons who will be tasked with ensuring that those PSV operators comply with the regulations. But it's not just only the persons in PSV. We have to cultivate a culture of, how would you put it? A culture of courtesy on the road. A culture, we're all law-abiding citizens, but once we have that culture of courtesy on the road, then it's going to be easy for us to navigate our streets safely. It's not just them, because they can only change what they can change, but it depends on all of us to not encourage these PSV drivers. We're not going to get on the buses at places other than bus stops. We're not going to get off at places other than bus stops if it can be helped. You know, we have as the public, Barbados, the public at large, we have also our role to play to ensure that there's discipline on our roads. Because if there's discipline amongst us, we can't have them being disciplined at us in discipline. It has to be that culture of discipline and courtesy right across the board. All players, all actors. And if we can do that, then we are well on our way to having a well-functioning transport sector. So we all have a personal responsibility to ensuring safety on our roads. We all have a personal responsibility to ensure that these traffic regulations are complied with. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to once again throw my full support behind this bill, these amendments. I think they will go well in ensuring that Barbados becomes a much safer place for persons to drive.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll begin with the phrase, "This is a day that the Lord has made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it." And I'm certainly happy to be in this chamber this morning, but I want to recognize in a serious way the passing of a family member this morning, and someone who have done tremendous work in this country over the years, 47 plus years at Barbados Light and Power Company. And I recall going there as a student, a first-year student on job attachment out of the University of the West Indies, and meeting this gentleman who introduced himself to me as a very close family member. Little did I know, I went home and I asked my mom, who's from that lovely part of Christchurch, the constituency of Christchurch, East Central, and there she was to tell me that's her first cousin. And this morning we laid him to rest. And he was responsible for the work that Light and Power has done in this country, the generation plant at Spring Garden, the steam generation plant. He toiled over 40-something years there. And I want to recognize his contribution this morning, not only as a family member, but as someone who has done a lot for this country for something years. And that's why I'm so properly attired this afternoon, because I went there to lay him to rest. And I thought that I had to put on what we would call some glad clothes in the country.
Honourable Member, you sure that you were not dressed, sir, rather than you dressed yourself, sir?
That too
sure
probably
that
was the case, but
by your
nonetheless,
significant
Mr.
other,
Speaker,
sir?
I don't wish to go there, but you may be right. You may be right. Mr. Speaker, let me rise to support this bill to amend the Transport Authority Act Cap 295 to provide for the expansion of functions of the Transport Authority and for related matters. And I rise, Mr. Speaker, happy but still with a heavy heart, because when we look at this bill came about in 2007. This bill came to this chamber, right member for St. Michael's office, in 2007. And that was a significant year in this country, in that this said government was the order of the day, the Barbados Labour Party. And we saw the need then to undertake better planning of the public transport system. We saw the need as well to better monitor and regulate the operations of the public transport system. We saw the need also to restrict and monitor how road taxis and various other forms of public transport were operated in this country. And let me just speak to you in Bajan parlance. We operated back then, prior to this bill, persons can get up any morning and decide they own a taxi and they can transport people from St. Philip to Bridgetown. And then they can leave Bridgetown. When the St. Philip to Bridgetown route, in their view, as what we call abated and there are no ones on the route, then go to Spikestown to transport persons. And then after business hours, then they hustle back to the school children in St. Philip. And if you saw how the place was in mayhem and chaos in St. Lucie, because I at them times were playing my trade in the north of this country, and I saw how they operated. But this government saw it fit to introduce this bill, Transport Authority Bill, to regulate the way the public transport was indeed operating. And, you know, this government continues to deconstruct and reconstruct outmoded legislation, outmoded policies, outdated policies. And why we are doing that? Because we want Barbados not only to be fit for purpose in tourism, and there's a direct correlation between good transportation and tourism. But we don't want Barbados only to be fit for purpose in the industry of tourism and agriculture, but there's a serious impact that good transportation have in this country. And I heard the member for St. Michael's Southeast this morning, because I listened to her, and I also heard the member for St. Michael's South Central, and I now just heard the member for St. Andrew. And what is critical, the common thread, is that this government recognizes the importance of having an orderly, a well-organized, efficient, and effective transportation system. Because, as you said, member for St. Andrew and member for St. Michael's Southeast, it impacts families in a major way. Businesses can be closed as a result of inefficient transport in this country. Schools can be closed as a result, and we saw that before, as a result of miscommunication with transportation in this country. We can impact several economic activity and social activities. We can literally disrupt an entire country when the transportation system is in chaos and in mayhem. And that's why I rise this afternoon. Not to really dive into the sections, the amendment of Section 4, but and the critical section that I think is amendment of Section 23, which deleted the subsection and substituted with the whole role of the authority to issue the license and suspend or cancel any license, and dealing with the order of conduct for conductors, not only drivers. I'm not going to dive into that because there is some merit there, because I don't want to stray too far, because I plan to spend 10 minutes, member for St. Michael's Southeast, and Mr. Speaker, only 10 minutes, because only last week I visited the Transport Authority, a friend of mine who worked there, and I visited that friend. And there was that friend, who shall remain nameless in this chamber, telling a young man, I don't like how you are dressed. How you dress will impact several things. We have moved away from persons driving a car to pick up people in the slippers and Apache pants, and a lady with a head tie, and just jump in a car to transport people. Because when you leave home, you don't know what you're going to meet, who you're going to meet, that's going to impact your business. I'm going to go there shortly. So the impact of good operators in this country is significant to our tourism product, is significant to the effective functioning of our school system, is significant to the effective functioning of commerce in this country. And I go there because as Minister of Commerce, in 2018, I had the privilege to work with the former Minister of Transport and Works and the Transport Board to form the TAP program, and also the trade union member for St. George North. We sat on a regular basis to have many discussions as Minister of Commerce. Some may be asking why the Minister of Commerce, because Commerce is responsible for the formation of cooperatives, and the Transportation Augmentation Program is a cooperative, and that's why Commerce came in. A unified body that will give you bargaining power, that will give you the leverage to go to the banks and lending institutions to help you own a bus, and that is what we did in this country, because a lot of these men went to fund access during my time as minister and even after. But under this government, this is more fundamental, it ain't about me or my time, is under this government to purchase buses, to enter that program, and to form businesses. And, you know, this government continues to push entrepreneurship, not only in the tourism sector, the transport sector, the IT sector, sporting sector, the housing sector. But this government continues to place efforts on building a local economy, because we saw what can happen when you depend wholly and solely on the international market for everything. So entrepreneurship in agriculture, critical. And entrepreneur, just as important as entrepreneurship in tourism. And when that TAP program was formed, they came under the scrutiny and the rules of the Transport Authority. Because we recognize as a government that the public transport, in terms of transport board buses, we had a depleted fleet when we came to office. We had to do something. We had to make sure not only to form businesses among the transportation sector to allow them to operate, move them from the informal sector, from wearing the slippers in the morning to dressing properly, having polo shirts and dress shirts. We move them from the informal sector into the formal business sector so they can be recognized by the lending institutions. And that was big when we came to office. I congratulate the government, the Prime Minister, and those who had a hand in this. All of us in here. And I know the member for St. Michael West Central was a chairman there. He did a lot of work on this, the member. So, Mr. Speaker, when I stand this afternoon on this bill, the amendment that would give more teeth to the Transport Authority, I stand here having seen and listened to the average man who could not own a bus, who left Transport Board and wanted to own a own bus and to become an entrepreneur, to see that a lot of them today are indeed part of this transport augmentation program, regulated by the Transport Authority Act. All of them fall under this act. And we have moved now from persons getting up with a scatter shot and based on whims and fancy and deciding I'm going to drive here today. They're regulated now. Thank you, Minister, member for St. Michael's Southeast. I thank you. And the team, member for St. Andrew, I thank you. The team that has worked tirelessly to bring it to this stage. A member for St. Michael West Central, I can't forget him. Former Minister of Commerce, yours truly. I got to take a little credit too. I have to take a little credit. The member for Christchurch West, who sits next to me. We did exceptionally well for our people. We did well for our people in this country, and we have to tell the story. We cannot wait for the naysayers to tell our stories. We have to tell the story. And I think this is fundamental what we are doing here. The enfranchisement of the average man who can drive and own a bus. Oh my God, man. This is indeed remarkable. Remarkable. Remember, for St. Michael West, he can say that. This is indeed remarkable. I hope I'm not exciting you to get up now to speak, and I know I have. But, Mr. Speaker, something else I wish to raise in this chamber. Not only the opportunity was presented to form small businesses and persons to own their own businesses in terms of transport through the loan scheme that we have at Fund Access, but we were able to rationalize the route. It is one thing to form a business, but it is another thing to make that business profitable, right? Member for St. James South? You can form a business, but if government don't create the environment and put the systems and the regulations and the legislation in place to allow these businesses to be profitable, then we're again spinning top in mud. So what we did, member for St. Michael Southeast, we rationalized the routes. Because, and this is fundamental, don't let's forget these 2 points. Number one, this government bring this legislation to Parliament in 2007. The last administration failed to improve upon it. We demitted office in 2008, and they did nothing really to give the authority the teeth, not only to issue, but to regulate, to discipline. And that is what we are doing here. The amendments to Section 4 of Cap 295 and Section 23. They are critical amendments to give teeth to the authority. And I thank you, member for St. Michael Southeast DPM. But my point, and I wish to end on this point here. These gentlemen and women, because there are women too that own these businesses, we are proud as a government. But what mistake was made prior to this legislation being amended is that the unscrupulous behavior by the then Minister of Transport and Works, can't even recall the full title for the ministry back then, just giving out permits, whims and fancy, giving out permits. Oh, you in blue today, permit for you. Oh, you wearing the tie today? Oh, today is tie there for permit. Okay, you go on with white shoes. Today is permit there for white shoes. Okay, you hair long. Oh, today is long there for It was indeed free for all. I'm not saying we shouldn't empower. Don't get me wrong, members, and don't get me wrong in the public. We have to empower the ordinary man and the ordinary woman in this country to become entrepreneurs to boost this local and domestic economy. That is our thrust. But do it orderly, man. Bring some discipline to it, man. Bring some ethics to it, man. Don't just do it as a cowboy and a wild boy. Don't just do it to benefit you. And that was the problem with the last administration. Don't forget Barbados. That is what happened. Persons come to my office on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to put you on the spot because you know what I'm talking about. They applied for permits for eons, and we want the average man to own these permits. But when you have the unscrupulous behavior for the former minister, thank you, member for St. Philip North, who dealt with that. But we can't forget it because we cannot allow these debates to pass without us mentioning these things, what they did to this country and to the people of this country, told them a bunch of lies on parliamentary, sorry, Mr. Speaker, untruths. Giving one man 7 and 8 permits. We want to give ordinary Barbadians permits. Member for St. Michael Southeast, and I heard you trumpeting that all the time. And member for St. Andrew, ordinary people must get them. But you can't just pick up and give your friends all. Your friends are not the only persons in Barbados that can own a business, a transport business. No. Mr. Speaker, no. And we said none of that. And that is why when persons approach my office on a daily basis, oh, I want a ZR permit. And sometimes I tell them, listen, and do not hide behind them and tell people you can get back to them. Tell them the truth. Tell them the last administration made a mockery and they engaged in unscrupulous behavior, unethical behavior, indiscipline, and recklessness in distributing permits in this country. That's what we have to tell them. Let the Ansard record that. Write it down. I might not be able to recollect the 4 phrases that I just used to describe how the last administration behaved with these permits. What they should have been doing is what is being done now by the member for St. Michael South East and the member for St. Andrew, amending the legislation to bring some order and give some authority to the Transport Authority. And Mr. Speaker, that was the only reason why I rose to add my voice to this debate. Because, you know, we don't dwell in history, but it is always good to recognize where you came from and where you are now and where you're going. We know where we came from. We started this in 2007. We know what transpired between 2008 and 2018. Nothing was done to enhance and improve upon the legislation that we brought to this Parliament in 2007. And here we are now again, indeed enhancing it, making Barbados more orderly, regulating the public transport, because we recognize it was an expensive venture to have 200 buses in this country. So we had to incorporate the small businesses to help us provide efficient and effective transport to keep this country running on a daily basis. And I'm proud of this team. This team is indeed a world-class team. I am mixing my words. I am not pompous, but I am saying to you, I am proud of the work that has gone on by the previous ministers of Transport and Works, Transport Board, and I'm proud of the work of this government. And Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the member for St. Michael South East. I want to congratulate the government for bringing the amendment to this legislation to give more power to the Transport Authority so we can effectively and efficiently maintain a transportation system for the betterment and the continuous development of this country. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you on this very special day.
I remember Mr. Michael Sophie's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to close off the debate, but before I do so, allow me the opportunity to thank all honourable members who have spoken on this particular amendment. I didn't expect the level of contributions that came forward this morning and certainly this afternoon. And in particular, the last speaker reminded me of a time when we sat on the opposition and we had to defend the legacy of the then Barbados Labour Party. And sometimes when you have 30 seats, sometimes it sometimes feels as though it is inappropriate to remind people of the legacy of a political party, because sometimes people feel as though you're trying to pat yourself on the back. But I'm a student of history, sir, and I believe, like I think the honourable member that just spoke, that it is important not to ridicule sometimes the other side, but sometimes to reflect on where we have come in terms of the journey from which we have come, and certainly to be able to appreciate where we are in terms of the strides that have been made. It is why I started this morning by going back to manifestos of the Barbados Labour Party to remind this chamber and to remind the public that back in 1991, discussions were started in relation to what today we call a Barbados Mass Transit Authority, but what then, some 32 years ago, was referred to as a vision for a public transport authority, sir. I say that because it is not by chance that we have been consistent over the years in terms of trying to move in this direction. It is not by chance that we just wake up one day and decide that we're going to make amendments or that we're going to empower a particular class of persons, sir. It is because this party is actually driven by the vision, certainly of its founders, but also the further crafted vision of a number of its leaders over time. And sir, the mission remains the same despite the fact that the leaders may change from time to time. But when you reflect on where we have come from, we have been consistent in the empowerment and the enfranchisement of the people of this country, especially the poor people and the vulnerable people and the people, in a sense, who do not have the type of wealth that others may have in this land. Sir, that has been the consistency of this administration. It has been borne out in what we have done in the public transportation sector. We were on the front line defending the minibus owners, defending the road taxi owners. We've been on the front line of establishing an authority to be able to regulate because we recognize they had a part to play in this society and in relation to public transportation. And we basically decided that we had to find a way not to stifle the entrepreneurship of the cadre of persons who enter the sector, but rather to be able to regulate in a way that allowed for all of the stakeholders to appreciate how important the issue of safety was in this country for people who had to use public transportation. So, sir, this is not a fly-by-night position that this party has taken. It has taken a long time, as I said earlier, to make this change. I don't think it is parliamentary to say it is whatlessness that has brought us to this point. But the truth of the matter is, like my colleague from St. George South, I too am a little concerned that it has taken this long for this type of amendment to be made and for us to be in a position where we are now closer to having regulations to be able to give the Transport Authority teeth. I can't hide my inner feelings. I would not be myself if I did not say it as I see it, sir. But we are here, and I am certainly satisfied that we have done all that we can up to this point to be able to incorporate into these amendments, but also the upcoming regulations, a sense of what the stakeholders have asked us to look at. Some of the colleagues would have spoken to the future of public transportation. Again, as I said, the mission remains the same. It may just be called something completely different. But in terms of the process that has to take place to get us to a modern public transportation system, sir, that process has started. It is not without efforts, it is not without research, it is not without the engagement of time and energy to refine and redefine the things that will help to make a public transportation system work. So we have been putting in the work. It is how we got to the point recently, I think it was last year, where we were able to get the increase in the taxi fares. Again, a weight that this class of persons had to do for almost 13 years before the increase in taxi fares came, sir. We were able as an administration to make sure that those persons were able to get a piece of the pie so that they could eat a food in this country, sir. It is also the reason that in the last budget, the Prime Minister would have indicated that one of the budgetary measures included the $3 million low-interest revolving fund, which is to be managed by Fund Access, that would allow for the acquisition of or the conversion to electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles, CNG or solar-powered passenger vehicles for the public service sector, sir. That, again, is not by mistake. It is part of a vision to make sure that average Barbadians can play a part in this country's transformation to green energy. We did not wake up one morning and shove it into the budgetary measures, sir. It is a consistent, deliberate attempt by this administration to empower ordinary Barbadians. Again, in my discussions with the associations, some have already started to take advantage of the measures. They're excited about the fact that we have actually indicated through the Prime Minister that the $3 million is just the starting point. And it is to encourage them to get on board in terms of being able to have a cleaner energy being used in terms of helping us to accomplish our goals on a wider scale in this country in terms of renewable energy. Sir, I am mindful. Other colleagues raised the issue of the training of the inspectors, and by all means, I am like a stuck record when it comes to training and retraining. What job descriptions may have worked for us several years ago, 15 years ago, certainly cannot work today. And the nature of the work that transport inspectors may now be required to do obviously will have to be amended to reflect the demands of the sector at this point in time. Technology is not a fly-by-night thing either. We've introduced the drone technology in other areas. We have placed in this financial year within certainly the Ministry of Public Works and with the support of the Senior Minister in Infrastructure, we're working on trying to roll out the drone technology unit to be able to assist us, not just in the public service vehicle sector, sir, but also across government to be able to help us to supervise and to manage a number of the projects that we have across the ministries. So that again is our commitment to being able to help to support and to regulate this particular sector, but on a wider level, being able to use technology to be able to assist. Mention was also made, sir, of things like the demerit system. I think that is the more appropriate name. That I am aware is in progress in terms of the cabinet paper to be able to look at whether we can introduce a demerits point system. Again, all part of the process of tightening the provisions of the Transport Authority, bringing on board the electronic vehicle registration system. A number of things are happening, sir, within the licensing department, but also the overall public transportation system that is intended to help us to transform the sector. Now, the challenge sometimes, sir, is that, the problem this party has for decades is that we always have these big picture items that we want to accomplish. And, when I think of all of the things that we have set about to do in terms of transformation, if I go down the line, we got 10,000 houses that we propose to build so that people can have somewhere to live in this country, sir, so that they're not on waiting lists for decades and eventually falling off of lists. Sir, we have set out to do, 19 mini stadiums across the country to be able to ensure that our young and old people are able to, across communities, to be able to relax and to recreate in spaces that are safe. Sir, we have started the process of the green energy transformation, the renewable energy transformation. We have looked at reforms in education, which are coming soon, sir. We have started the digital transformation. All of these things, transformational. Everybody wants everything to come real fast. But I hate to break it to those who want to see these things happen overnight, that we are also, and I heard one of my colleagues speak to it, Honourable Member for St. Andrew, that while we are embarking on what is transformational, we have to bring people along, because there are a lot of people who believe that we can still live in an age 20 and 30 years ago or even more, and that systems are not to be changed in order to get us where we need to, sir. So while all of us may at some point get up every day with the same objectives of the 1991 manifesto to be able to execute, sir, there are others who will do their best to try to frustrate the efforts of this administration and others in the accomplishment of these goals. Sir, we are sure-footed in what it is that we have come here to accomplish. I think it is clear that the mission remains the same in terms of what we have set about to do. We have said we're going to introduce the cashless system, and we've started to do it. All of the transport board vehicles have the cashless system installed. They've been running through all of the technology to make sure that we perfect it, sir, before it goes wider to the full PSV vehicles. And we've started that process as well. We've started to introduce the electronic vehicle system, just waiting on the legislation to come so that we have the regulatory framework in which to operate. All of these things require sometimes technology that in many cases is not perfect, sir. And we've seen it, whether it's been the challenges we've had with the ID cards or whether it is the challenges in any other sector with IT. We have realized that while we are going in a direction of transformation, sometimes systems break down and sometimes people have to keep up with the pace at which this administration is going. Sir, this amendment is no different. This is part of the process of us being able to get to what all of us understand and have signed on to as the process towards the Barbados Mass Transit Authority. It is not going to be a situation where we just wake up one morning and we have a piece of legislation that governs the public transportation sector. We have to strengthen what we have, give what we have teeth to be able to start to help us to make that transformation. And therefore, things like the route rationalization, things like the fleet management, all of those systems in terms of technology have to help us to be able to drive towards a direction of a Barbados Mass Transit Authority, sir. I am pleased to say to you that we've started to put those papers in place to get us to that point. Because while you will see manifesto after manifesto alluding to where we want to go, I can say today, after the work of several of my predecessors, that we are far closer to getting to that mission that started many, many, many decades ago in terms of a vision that the transportation sector needed to be properly regulated, sir. And therefore, I look forward to being, whether it is in this position or certainly as part of an administration that gets it to that point, that I am happy that we can be part of an administration that is working towards objectives and goals to execute a vision that was started by our forefathers many years ago. Sir, I would just want to end by saying we've had predecessors in this chamber and certainly in the Ministry of Public Works who would have ignored the fact that this particular amendment needed to be made and needed to be the regulations needed to come, and that the amendments needed to be made to the Transport Authority Act. Sir, I hear sometimes the sentiments being expressed that we should move faster and we should, hurry up and get the legislation on the EVR, and we should do this and we should do that. And great is the wisdom that comes from the outside, sir. But I am of the view that we are working at the speed that is reasonable for the public officers who are also sometimes very stretched because of the demands of this administration, and we are trying our best to be able to accomplish the transformation that we have set about to do. So, sir, I thank all honourable members. Let me again thank the Barbados Police Service, the members in the CPC department, the Director of Transport Authority and her staff, the legal counsel within the ministry, and all of the public officers who would have worked on this amendment. As simple as it may seem, given that it has taken so long to come, I know that it has gone through many iterations to be able to get here, and for that I am grateful that we are in a position today to be able to see this through. The work will now start. In terms of being able to roll this out. I am told that very shortly the interviews will be done for the transport inspectors, and along probably by at least the middle of June, we should be in a position to be able to have the additional strengthening that is needed to be able to supplement the two that we currently have, which is clearly inadequate to be able to police this sector. But we will spend the time in the interim, making sure that Barbadians understand their roles and their responsibilities, from owners to conductors, to the drivers, to passengers within this country. And we will try to continue to strengthen public transportation in a way that is meaningful to all Barbadians. Sir, with those few words, I beg to move that this amendment bill do now pass.
No, the bill be read a second. Honourable member, you asked for the bill to be read a second time.
Beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report progress to this honored speaker and the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report the passing of one bill in committee. To his honour the speaker, all honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr.
Honourable.
Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Transport Authority Amendment Bill 2023. Sorry, Act 2023.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to move that the House be adjourned until the 2nd of May at 10 a.m.
Tuesday.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 2nd day of May, 2023, at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 2nd day of May, 2023, at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.